the Admiral Kid Club in Point Loma. And at this time, I'm going to ask Henry Mann to provide us with an invocation. Cordelia.
Let us pray. Gracious God, this evening we gather to celebrate the 60 years you have given these Point Loma High School students since their graduation, and the graduates from other years who are with us. We thank you for carrying them through the multitude of experiences, both good and bad, that they lived through during the intervening years, and for the opportunity now to renew their many friendships. In the midst of this joy, we remember those classmates who are unable to attend because of illness or disability, and we also remember those who are no longer with us. They may be absent in body from this world, but they are forever present in our memories. We pray that you will continue to be with us and bring us together again as we go our separate ways. We also thank you for the food we are about to enjoy and for all the blessings of this special occasion. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, well, everyone enjoy your meal, and I'll be back at 8:15 with some more festivities. All the years I lived here in San Diego and Point Loma, I always wondered about the Admiral Kid Club, and I did some research on it, and it turns out that Admiral Kidd is one of the true heroes of World War II. And in December the 7th of 1941, he was a commander of the Battle Group 1 in Pearl Harbor. And he was aboard his flagship, which was the USS Arizona. And when the Japanese attacked, he went to the bridge and he took control of the entire defense of Pearl Harbor. Subsequently, the Japanese had a direct hit on the bridge and they killed the admiral and everyone else. And after that, of course, the magazines blew on the Arizona, it sank, and today it's a national shrine. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. I think he was certainly the first flag officer in World War II to be awarded that honor. And I just want to say he was a true hero, and it's an honor to be here this evening. Me either, Lois. So at this time, I'd like to present our reunion committee. And basically, it's the same cast of characters that were present yesterday, but the exception that this evening's leader and director is Joan Ganop. Joan. And she's been assisted by Deanie Stevens, Mary A. Plant, Esther Jane Paul, Shirley Mann, Marilyn Calabsa, Sharon Jackson, Mary Alice Gonsalves. The male contingent was Jerry Eggleston, Dan Freeman, Joe Campbell, Claire Cunningham, and myself. 2 years of a lot of effort and diligence, and I think it's really paid off. This is congratulations. You agree?
Well done.
Bev agrees. Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the microphone's working, all right? Okay, because there are other people who are going to get up here, and I want to make sure they're set up properly. Okay. Yeah, yesterday was a mess. Right. So this part of the program is what I've done is we've invited some of your classmates to come up and chat with you for a while. And in the 60 years since we graduated high school, there have been tremendous changes in the world and certainly in our personal lives and things that just aren't the same. And so what we thought was that we could ask people with different professions and different experiences to come up and just briefly share their experience and talk about some of the changes they've seen. So I'm going to begin with Dr. John Hege. Dr. John Hege has a birthday today.
A birthday?
Yeah, we're not sure how old he is, but he can probably share that with us. John has spent 37 years in medical practice in the Bay Area, right, John? Yeah. Okay, John.
It's interesting to be in a room with, I don't know how many, but when everybody's 78 years old. It's Jim asked me to talk about life after graduation in medicine, so I sat down at the word processor, and I think I got carried away. So you might want to get a refill in your coffee. I entered UCLA the September after our graduation, had a chaotic freshman year, living in 4 different places and switching majors early on from engineering to pre-medicine. My father had been a doctor, and an older cousin who was very influential in my life was an engineer. And these 2 career choices would tug at me for many years. I'd fallen in love the year we graduated, and my instincts took me from UCLA to Pomona College. Pomona was good to me. I graduated a physics major after another switch in majors. I'd broken up with my girlfriend, and I headed north to UC Berkeley for a year of graduate school and then a year of work. I fell in love again for the final time with Tamra Gale Cummings of Walnut Creek. She was a junior at Berkeley and a zoology major. In 1959, I entered UCSF Medical School. Tam began her senior year at Berkeley. We were married the summer of 1960 and moved into married student housing behind the medical center in San Francisco. Tam worked in the medical center as a pathology technician for 2 years. She earned a teaching credential attending San Francisco State College at night, and then taught science at Miss Hamlin's School for Girls in San Francisco. I wasn't sure the doctoring shoe really fit until my 3rd year in medical school, when we began seeing patients at San Francisco County Hospital. My feelings for medicine gelled, and there were never any doubts thereafter. We moved across the bay to Oakland in 1963 for a year of rotating internship at Highland Alameda County Hospital for equal parts of medicine, surgery, obstetrics, psychology, and emergency room. We lived 1 block from the hospital, and Tam continued commuting to San Francisco for her science at Hamlin School. Internship was intense and exciting. I went into the Navy for 2 years of active duty after internship. I was assigned to the Radiological Defense Laboratory in the San Francisco Naval Shipyard for 2 years of research in immunology. A lab in school was always boring for me, but working independently, plus the scientific challenges, made the Navy years another time of intense excitement. In the Navy, we had both extra money and extra time. We bought a small racing sailboat and got to know the sailing venues around Northern California, especially San Francisco Bay, but also Monterey to the south, Tamales Bay to the north, and some of the Northern California lakes. Vietnam War was starting to heat up. One of the doctors at the lab volunteered for what he thought was a limited stateside U.S. Marine maneuver. He ended up in Vietnam for 6 months. The rest of us laid low and kept our noses close to the laboratory bench. In 1966, I started an internal medicine residency at the San Francisco Veterans Administration Hospital. We bought our first house on 20th Avenue in the San Francisco-Richmond district, a mile or 2 from the hospital, within bicycling range. Tam was still teaching at Hamlin's. So we settled in and began the process of adopting our first 2 children, John, 1967, and Laura, in 1969. I enjoyed the clinical medicine at the VA, but still wondered whether I would follow a clinical or a research pathway? That question was left open taking a rheumatology fellowship at the UCSF Medical Center in 1968, where there was clinical involvement with rheumatic diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis and systemic lupus and gout, and there was immunology research studying antibody-forming cells in the laboratory. Rheumatic diseases is the area in medicine most closely related to immune processes. For example, rheumatoid arthritis is characterized by the presence in the blood of antibody which reacts to antibody protein itself. In systemic lupus patients circulate antibody which react to DNA, the genetic material. So there have continued to be hopes that studying the immunology of these diseases would lead to understanding their causes and also their cures. So far, it's been the study of the biochemistry of the inflammatory response, not the disease immunology, that has led to major strides in the rheumatic diseases. Skipping over understanding the disease, the joints are inflamed, forget the cause, just stop the inflammation. In 1953, Mr. Lamont announced to us physics students that James Watson and Francis Crick had discovered the structure of DNA. The structure was simple and beautiful, and they recognized its potential for genetic code, a repository in the nucleus of each of our cells for our inherited traits. Over the course of my medical career, this discovery slowly blossomed into a highly refined understanding of the biological cell, including the cascade of processes that occur when a tissue becomes inflamed, when it becomes swollen and warm and red and tender. In early 1970, the rheumatology fellowship was drawing to a close. What to do next? I had not been as successful in the UCSF laboratory as I had been in the Navy. I had conceived of a new way of detecting antibody-forming cells, but hadn't been able to work it in the laboratory. I was depressed and thought maybe I would go to work for Kaiser in one of their facilities, but felt no enthusiasm for it. My energy was low. Then a remarkable thing happened. Looking at the results of an unrelated experiment, I realized I was seeing what I had been searching for with the new technique of detecting antibody-forming cells. I described it to Wally Epstein, my fellowship supervisor. Next morning, he'd instructed his technician to do experiments using the new method. I felt he was stealing my work, and I don't like confrontations and I avoid them, but I walked into Dr. Epstein's office that morning and let him know how I felt. Walking out, I was suddenly flooded with visions and feelings. I was floating 6 inches over the floor. I saw Moby Dick breach through the ocean surface. Old dreams came back to me, now their meaning's clear. I felt energized, and my future was laid out before me, and it was in clinical medicine. We wrote a paper on the new technique and sent it to Science. The referee rejected it as not sufficiently earth-shaking for a publication in Science, but with some kind words, and we published the technique in the Journal of Immunology. I arranged to rent space for medical practice in an internist's office in Oakland starting July 1st. I would be the first rheumatologist in the Oakland outside of the Kaiser system. What had happened? I believe I had experienced what St. Paul had felt on the road to Damascus when he converted to the new movement of Jesus of Nazareth. Psychologists call it a peak experience, often associated with religion. Friends noted the positive changes in me, and these changes powered me into private practice. They were life-altering. We rented a home on Jordan Road in Oakland. I worked in the medical clinic at Highland Hospital 2 mornings a week and later started an arthritis clinic there. My private practice gradually picked up steam. In 1972, we bought our home in Piedmont, a residential community within the city of Oakland, where we still reside. When I was a fellow at UCSF, medications available to treat rheumatoid arthritis or systemic lupus were limited to aspirin, 12 to 20 tablets a day, Indocin, prednisone, gold shots, very toxic, and anti-malaria medication that, oddly enough, seemed to reduce joint inflammation. Ibuprofen and naproxen came online in the 1970s as safer substitutes for aspirin. Methotrexate, a treatment for childhood leukemia in high doses, turned out to be very effective in low doses in rheumatoid arthritis, and methotrexate continues to be a mainstay of rheumatoid arthritis treatment. But the headline grabbers at that time in arthritis was joint replacement. First hip replacements in the late 1960s, and then knees, later shoulders, ankles. Problems with infection were reduced using short courses of antibiotics at the time of surgery, and post-operative blood clots, some fatal, were largely prevented by brief anticoagulation. For us, the big news in 1976 was the birth of our daughter Anne to complete our family. John was now 9 and Laura 7. In the 1980s, I began to notice patients complaining of working harder in their jobs. Managers were reducing staff and doubling up on job duties. I thought, that's interesting. I don't feel anything like that in the medical practice. Then Medicare converted its payment system from cost plus to diagnosis-based payments. Hospitals no longer made money the longer a patient stayed in the hospital. Instead, the hospitals now received a fixed payment for a pneumonia patient, for example, and made a profit only if they could reduce its cost of care for the patient. Suddenly gone were the carpets, which required 2 orderlies to push a gurney, and gone were the first-class chefs and the filet mignon suppers. Doctors were pressured to discharge patients sooner. Now efficiency was the key to hospital profit and even survival. I attended 6 hospitals when I first went into practice. Only 1 hospital survived the 1990s. It was clearly for the better. Hospital is a dangerous place, and the sooner you're out, the better. In the 1980s, California eliminated its law requiring health insurance companies to pay doctors the same for a given service. These companies could now negotiate with groups of doctors over price. This opened the door in California to prepaid HMOs. This increased competition with physicians and again encouraged efficiency in medical care. Now my lunchtimes and afternoons off are spent on the telephone. Noon-hour medical conferences are much less well attended. The less sick patients that had been treated in the hospital are now treated in the office, and the less sick patients treated in the office are now treated on the telephone. An editor of the New England Journal of Medicine called this phenomenon the Will Rogers effect. Will Rogers joked in the 1930s about California when he noticed that when the Okies moved from Oklahoma to California during the Dust Bowl days, the result was an increase in the average intelligence of both states. The intensity of medical care increased both in the hospital and in the office and on the telephone. Now it was taking 20 to 30 minutes per patient in the hospital instead of 15. And now I'm beginning to understand what patients were talking about when they complained of having to work so much harder only to take home a smaller paycheck. In the late 1990s and the 2000s, the promise of Watson and Crick unraveling the structure of DNA began to make itself felt. First, there was genetically engineered human insulin to replace pork and beef insulin, to which some developed allergy. The human genome was mapped out, with James Watson again heavily involved. In rheumatology, the so-called biologic anti-inflammatory medications, such as Enbrel, came along, which were genetically engineered to interrupt inflammation at a specific point. And they've been very helpful in several rheumatic diseases, including rheumatoid arthritis and psoriatic arthritis, to which Phil Mickelson can attest. And The knowledge and techniques developed to produce these medications hold great promise for the future. Over the course of my practice in Oakland, the number of rheumatologists gradually increased until there were 8 of us. Then the number gradually declined. In the last 5 or 6 years, I was again the only rheumatologist in Oakland, private practice. I saw patients for primary care in addition to rheumatology, so I was working flat out the last few years. Tam came down to the office to help out managing the books. We retired in 2007. My last day in the office was Halloween. I felt I had a great practice, yet wasn't able to give it away. 90% of rheumatology fellows at UCSF and at Stanford are female, and females are wary of solo practice. It's a shame. In 2009, our family experienced a tragedy which we had never anticipated. Our son John was shot in the line of duty as an Oakland policeman and very badly injured. He received superb care in the trauma department at Highland Hospital. He died the following day. As he had wished, his organs were donated for transplantation, heart, liver, and 2 kidneys. We, over the years, have gradually integrated this into our lives. His sisters, Laura and Ann, and their families are both doing well. Retirement has suited Tam and I better than we might have expected. Tam continues volunteering, especially at the Oakland Museum White Elephant Sale, and she's serving on the Alameda County Grand Jury this year. I kicked the medical habit cold turkey, and then I returned to junior high school. I ride my bike, play my clarinet, sail my boat, and tend my garden. I love my dear wife. What more could one ask for?
Terrific, John. John, that was terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much.